Father, please, God, we ask that you will speak, for we are listening. In Jesus' name, amen. There's a story in the book of 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 3. We find King Solomon. The Bible says the wisest man who ever lived. He finds himself, after he was made king, God tells him, ask for whatever you want. And he could have asked for anything. But he asked God for wisdom. I've entitled today's message, Be Careful What You Ask For. Now Solomon made a treaty with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married Pharaoh's daughter. Then he brought her to the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall all around Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the people sacrificed at the high places because there was no house built in the name of the Lord. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and burned incense at the high places. Verse 4, now the king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the great high place. Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings. Verse 6, and Solomon said, you have shown great mercy to your servant David, my father, because he walked before you in truth, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart with you. You have continued this great kindness for him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne. Now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king instead of my father David, but I'm a little child, and I don't know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people, whom you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to be numbered or counted. Therefore, this is what Solomon asked God for when God tells him, ask for whatever you want. He says, therefore, verse 9, give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? There's a passage in Scripture that wraps up neatly into today's message. We find Paul writing in the book of 1 Corinthians, and he says, the things that are spiritual are spiritually discerned. There's another scripture that I want you to just ponder just a little while. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. This is a simple message that, if understood, would bring about a change that even the darkest days of your life cannot undo. Let me say that again. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. This simple message, if understood, will bring about a change that even the darkest days of your life cannot undo. All means all. God says all things work together for our good. Not some, not most. He says all. Even the bad, all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. In Isaiah 55, verse 8, there's a passage of scripture that's written, and it says that his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And sometimes we like to put God in a box that we can manipulate. And we want him to be right on our time. Not simply right on time, but right on my time. Answering as I see fit. And as you consider what Isaiah writes, that his thoughts are not our thoughts, and then you consider what Paul writes, that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord, and then you start thinking that the all things, start remembering and considering that the all things that he says works together for our good includes the good and the bad. And then you realize if the bad works for my good, then his thoughts really don't mirror my thoughts. Because most times we don't see how the bad works for our good. All we simply see is the bad. And we feel the pain, and we wrestle through the pain, and we never slow down to take the time to consider what God might perhaps be doing in the midst of all of that pain, in the midst of all of that stuff. You see, he does things differently. I know that's true because one of my favorite stories in the Bible is Jesus on the cross. He's nailed on the cross between two thieves, and both of them undoubtedly deserved their reckoning, undoubtedly deserved what was coming their way. And one of the thieves said to Jesus in mocking fashion, he said, hey, if you are who you say you are, why don't you go ahead and come down, and while you're at it, take us down to save us too. But the other thief, understanding that there was something uniquely divine and different about the man who was in the middle on that cross, began to chastise the other thief that, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. Of course, I'm using my words here. We deserve what we're getting, but this man is being crucified for something that he didn't do. And then he says to Jesus, Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, save me. Remember me. And Jesus says, today, what you ask is yours. That's why I know his ways are not like our ways. Because if it were up to us, that thief would have to do some penance. If it were up to us, that thief would have to write 1,000 Hail Marys. If it were up to us, that thief would have to sit on a mourner's bench somewhere. If it were up to us, that thief would have to do 10,000 hours of community service. If it were up to us, that thief would have to go and make right with the people that he stole from, and the women that he raped, and whatever he did, whatever life of crime he lived. If it were up to us, he would have to make right, and then we would consider if he was worthy of salvation. But Jesus saves in a way that is just foreign to the way we think. Why? Because his ways are not like our ways. And his thoughts are not like our thoughts. And when we consider and finally understand how his mind works, this is how we could come to grips with every experience working for our good. Because we then realize that it's not about the experience, but it's about what God is doing in the experience. It's not about how it feels, but it's about what God is presently doing, how he's moving his hand, how his hand is moving on my behalf and on your behalf while I'm going through whatever I'm going through, because all things, good and bad, work for my good. With these facts in mind, here's my first one. when we consider that all things work together for our good, and we open our mouths and our hearts and we begin to ask God for things, for deliverance, for strength, for whatever it is we need at that particular time, be prepared, number one, to take the scenic route. What is he talking about? I'm so glad you asked. With all of this in mind, God often answers us by taking us through the scenic and adventurous route. You see, the scenic route allows us to see and experience things that we ordinarily would not see and experience. The scenic route will most likely leave us with a lasting impression. The scenic route can often be treacherous, but the view is breathtaking. You may not like what it took to gain the experience, but it more than likely will change you for the rest of your life. When we ask God for whatever it is we're asking for, whether it is deliverance or healing or strength or perspective or clarity, wisdom, whatever it is, be prepared to take the scenic route. The route where if you're not careful, you might lose your footing. The route where, had you not taken that route, you will not be able to see the glorious panoramic view of God's will for your life. Because when we take the easy road, we only see what's available to be seen. But when we take the higher road and we allow God to be the navigational source, and we allow God to be the good shepherd and the one who leads us, he takes us in place, as Psalm 23 said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you fear no evil. Why? Because God is with you. And so he takes us the scenic route, and the views that we get will be life-changing. From my perspective, it may not be safe, but because I'm not relying on my perspective, on my ability to maneuver, and I leave the maneuvering to him, I know that he's got this. Because if he calls me to something, I know that he will bring me through that something. And if he calls me to a place and there are obstacles on my way to that place, I need not worry, because he who has called me, he's a faithful God. Be prepared to take the scenic route. I also noticed that God also promotes faith in us by giving us indirect answers. Indirect answers. The truth is that direct answers almost are never for our good. Let me make it personal. When I get direct answers, I have found that it is never for my good. Because direct answers don't promote faith in God. If I don't have to wait for something, then I can never appreciate the process. If I don't have to wait or fight for something, it's like trying to get a crown without a cross. That's why whenever we ask God for stuff, he always then put us through a test to see if we are not just worthy, but to see if we are willing to go to the mat with him, to fully trust him, come what may. That's what he did with Abraham as he was supposed to get his son Isaac. And he says, go ahead and kill that boy. Go to Mount Moriah and kill that boy. I can only imagine how treacherous and laboring that trek was, going up that mountain to Mount Moriah to kill the boy who was supposed to be the son of the promise. But we found out that it was just a test. God needed to know that he was willing and would be willing to sacrifice his greatest and most prized possession, his son. God promotes faith by giving us indirect answers. When was the last time your faith grew without it being tested? Let's grow. If I'm getting everything I've got, everything I need, just because I've asked, then my faith never gets the opportunity to be tested. If I don't learn how to wait on the Lord and allow him to renew my strength, to run and not grow weary, and to walk and never grow tired, how can I appreciate and how can my faith and trust and belief and hope in him grow if it's never been tested? And so in asking something of God, does he give it to us? Or does he give us the opportunity to get it? Think about that for a second. In his giving things to us and answering our prayers, this is where the process is. This is where we find ourselves on the scenic route. This is where the testing of our faith occurs. It is in the waiting. You may call it waiting. I might call it the scenic route. You may call it waiting. I call it the testing of my faith. You may call it waiting, but I call it the process of becoming more and more faithful, understanding that without faith it is impossible to please God, understanding that the just shall live by faith and not by what I get easily and not by sight. And so the testing becomes absolutely necessary, because ultimately what God wants to do for us is to allow us and pave the way, open the door for us to become mature Christians in Christ, who don't lament the minute we have to wait, who don't get depressed the minute we have to wait, who don't go lower than a worm's belly the minute we have to wait, but we understand that all things do work together for our good. And even in the waiting, I'm becoming more and more like him, trusting him more and more, and becoming even more pleasing to him. And this is where he's working everything out for my good. And so, if we ask for strength, here it is. Does he give us strength? Or does he put you in a position where you have to demonstrate that you're strong? On the back end of the story that I read in 1 Kings, King Solomon, newly minted king over God's people. As soon as Solomon asked God for what he wanted, there was a situation that occurred among God's people. Two women, they were roommates, and they both had children. Check this out. They both were sleeping with their children in bed, and one of them rolled over on their child, and killed the child. The other child lived through the night. The mother who killed her son inadvertently, she recognized that her son was gone. And so she took her dead son and switched with the mother whose son was still alive. When they woke up that morning, there was a dispute as to who the son belonged to. The dead son, who was his mother, and the child who was alive, who was his mother. They brought the case to Solomon. Remember, he had just asked God to give him wisdom. They brought the case to Solomon. And Solomon, in his God-given wisdom, instead of saying eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or casting lots, he called for a sword and he said, seeing that the both of you can't agree on whose son this is, the son that's alive, I will split the baby in two, and I will give you half, and you get the other half. Solomon understood that cream rises to the top. He understood that the real mother then would show herself, and the false mother also would show herself. And so as he took the sword and he was about to split the baby in two, the mother whose son was dead, the false mother, she said, go ahead, split him. If I can't have him, nobody's going to have him. But the mother who was the correct mother, the true mother, said, no, don't kill the child. Give him to her. If she wants him that much, give him to her. Solomon recognized then and there that she was the real mother, because even she was willing to give him up if it meant his life would be spared. My point is simply this. Solomon asked for wisdom, but God didn't just grant him wisdom. He placed him in a position where he had to demonstrate that he was wise. Think about that for a second in the context of what we ask of God. Think about the fact that we ask for strength sometimes, but God then gives us difficulties that would make us strong. And if I'm not connected to him, I'm going to miss the fact that God is answering my prayer by giving me the opportunity to demonstrate. But because we're so jaded in our relationship with God, we figure that if we ask for A, he ought to just present A in our bosom. And if the answer doesn't look like A, then it must have meant that God isn't alive. It must have meant that he's asleep. It must have meant that he didn't hear me. It must have meant that I need to pray some more. It must have meant that his answer is no, when in fact he has answered you. But because spiritual things are spiritually discerned and we are operating in the carnal and not in the spiritual, we miss God's answers and miss opportunities to grow and become even more mature Christians. And so we ask for strength, and God gives us difficulties that would make us strong. We pray for wisdom, and then God sends us problems, the solution of which develops wisdom. We plead for prosperity, and then God gives us the brain and the brawn to work. In order to be prosperous, we plead for courage, and God gives us dangers to overcome. We ask for favors, and God gives us opportunities. And someone today is praying for justice, and he gives us something to fight for. What I'm trying to say is, don't you dare tap out. Because God might be in the process of answering your prayer. You got to understand that if it's for your good, then you got to expect good to come from it. It may not feel good, but good is coming for it, coming from it. Because he who has promised, he's a faithful God. And so if it's working for my good, then I'm going to expect that good will come from it. No matter what I see, no matter how it feels, he said all things work together for my good. So I'm going to believe him for his word today, because he's a faithful God. He's a promise-keeping God. He's a way-making God. He's a God who says that I'm the beginning, I'm the last. My eyes have already run to and fro throughout your life, and I know the end from the beginning. So trust me if I say that it's working for your good. I know it feels hot. I know the bank account looks crazy right now. I know the letters that you've been getting, and they said that they're coming to get some stuff, and they're coming to take back the items that they lent you, and they loaned faithful God. And even if they take it, he's still a faithful God. And somehow it is still working for your good. It may not make sense to me, but I believe in him that when I can't trust his hand, when I can't trace his hand, I am trusting his heart. So don't lament, but anticipate. Don't fret, but posture yourself for victory. Don't worry, but wait in expectancy, because what seems as simply a trial is actually God's means for your turnaround. There are two realities that's always at work. You've got the carnal reality, where all we see is what our finite eyes, physical eyes, allow us to see. And so you see brokenness, you see pain, you see injustice, you see chaos and turmoil, you see sleepless nights, you see depression and anxieties. You see all and feel all of that stuff, scars. But there's an alternate reality that says, though you slay me, yet will I trust you. While at the same time it's hot and heavy, and life is really messed up, and I can't seem to maneuver through the cobweb of life, but simultaneously and in parallel fashion, there's another reality that says, I know my Redeemer lives. There's another reality that says that all things work together for my good if I love the Lord and if I'm called according to his purpose. And I've got to choose which reality will I exist in, which reality will consume my time. Will I be on the carnal side or will I be on the spiritual side where I don't see it just yet, but I believe him anyhow. I don't see it just yet, but I'm trusting his heart. I don't see it just yet, but I believe that he's a promise-keeping God. I don't see it just yet, but I believe that he will make a way out of no way. I don't see it just yet, but I believe that as I trust him more and believe in him more, that I'm pleasing him and pleasing him more, and I'm becoming more and more like him, or I can stand on the carnal side and just lament because things aren't going the way I think they ought to go, and I begin to trust my eyes instead of trusting his heart. Finally get to the point where I know for sure and I believe with certainty that all things do work together for my good. The tendency that I have to grow despondent and to diminish in spiritual stature, that tendency that I have will decrease. Primarily because now I'm viewing my trials in a different way. They were meant to take me out, but I'm not worried about what they were meant to do. I'm only concerned about what I know he's already done. He's already made a way. He's already answered. He's already paved. He's already gone ahead of me and made my path straight. And it's not that God has to catch up. He's waiting for us to catch up. He's already at that reality already in the future, but he's waiting for us to get there by faith. And so my propensity to be despondent decreases. Trials don't take me out like they used to anymore. Turmoil don't affect me the way they used to anymore. As the folk love to say, I don't speak to the size of my trials anymore. I speak to the size of my God. Because he's the undisputed champion of the cosmos. He defeated the enemy when he was at his weakest. When the enemy thought he had him in the Garden of Gethsemane, and his humanity cried out, and he wanted to find another way. He was ready to throw in the towel, and he wanted to find another way to Calvary. But and that they forced him to take his cross and be paraded like a criminal through the streets of Jerusalem all the way up to Golgotha's hill. And they nailed him on that cross. And the enemy just knew that after seeing his mother, that somehow that would break his heart. But he hung in there, and they challenged him, and they mocked him, and they said, come down from the cross, and we would believe. But I can only imagine that appealing to his humanity, it probably was tempting. But I'm so glad he hung in there and he did not come down from that cross. I'm so glad. Body blow number 3. And I know they say 3 strikes and you're out, but the enemy, he doesn't subscribe to those rules because they put him in a grave. They put him in a tomb that was somebody else's tomb. And they had guards standing on the outside. Because the enemy, those folk were in the carnal. They thought at that point that was a spiritual thing. And so they put human beings at the door. Not recognizing that at that point, the case was now in the Father's hand. And the Bible says that God is spirit. He is not carnal. God is spirit. The case was now in the Father's hands. And so I would like to believe that he called out to his son, and Jesus came out 3 days later. Oh, grave, where is your victory? With all power in his hand. Body blow number 4. And the next great event will be when he comes again. I reckon he's going to try to keep him from coming also. But when I look to the back of the book, you see, that's our cheat sheet. I look to the back of the book, and the back of the book says, one day he that shall come, he will come, and he will not keep silent. So I know the enemy can't keep him from coming back again. Body blow after body blow. And now Jesus being and leaving the ultimate blueprint for us to follow. And here's the beautiful thing. It's not a physical work for us. It's simply a spiritual work. It's a work that says simply, by faith, salvation is yours. For we are saved by grace through faith in Jesus, who did all of the heavy lifting, so that we now just have to simply believe in our hearts and confess with our mouths. And the Bible says we are saved. Glory be to God. And so today I just want to appeal to anybody who is listening. You have an opportunity to say in your heart, Jesus, I'm all yours. Jesus, I'm so glad that you did the heavy physical lifting, you did the heavy emotional lifting, you did the heavy spiritual lifting. And now all I've got to do is just believe in the merits found in the work and in your shed blood. And he will redeem you. He will restore you. He will transform you. He will revive you. And most of all, I love it, he will save you. No matter what you're facing,